Nancy Merrill, and I ask a lot of questions to find out what really goes on in the minds of millionaires.
This is Mario Garnero, the world-famous Brazilian entrepreneur, considered the visionary who developed the computer, mobile phone, and biofuel industries in his country. He's the founder and chairman of Brazil Invest, Brazil's premier merchant bank. Credited as the father of the ethanol car, he's been coming to China for over 30 years, sharing his business acumen and passion for sustainable energy. Is it easy to do business with your Chinese friends?
They do not like the Brazilians to say no. We in Brazil do not like to say no, and the Chinese also
They don't like to say no either,
no.
really.
Yeah.
His enormous business success is due in part to the personal relationships he has had with international figures like Henry Kissinger, the United Nations Kofi Annan, former American presidents Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, and Prince Rainier and Prince Albert of Monaco. Mario, this is a great pleasure to talk with you.
It's a great pleasure, Nancy, to be here with you. I know how successful you are in Shanghai and your program, so I came a long way just to talk to you.
You came all the way from Brazil just to talk to me. I'm very honored.
Very good.
You have been coming to China since 1981. Tell me why you came here in 1981.
Because I had the idea that China would be waking up very quickly, would be integrated in the world much faster than people thought at that occasion.
What made you think they would be faster than what most people expected?
Because there was firstly a tradition of the Chinese people. Second, a very aggressive way of progressing and changing into a more open society. And thirdly, that China has been for a long while, and you know that they tell that Colombo came into the Americas and discovered the Americas. The Chinese went there almost 50 years before, so they were already exploring seas and discovering ourselves before even Colombo. So I think that there was a lot of energy, a lot of opportunities, and proved well. I brought together Petrobras at that time, the Brazilian National Oil, Vale, that today is the large exporter of iron ore, and more companies into China, and proved that what I have thought is realizing today was a trade that goes between Brazil and China over $50 billion.
$50 billion.
We overpassed the States in our trade. China overpassed the States.
Wow. When I think of you again, there's so much to talk about, but it strikes me that simply petroleum and mobile phones and computers have literally defined the world as we know it. I mean, look at China. One of their biggest industries is the car industry, and you know that very well because of your involvement with Volkswagen, okay? But here they are building all these cars for this large consumer class that is emerging. But the cost of fuel is going up around the world.
That's
so
correct.
Speak to me about that and tell me what you say to your Chinese friends who are in the sustainable energy business, which is one of your biggest loves of your career, and the automobile industry. What do you say to them? What do you advise them? And what kinds of questions do they ask you?
I think that on the environmental process, what we had, if you go to São Paulo was a very polluted town. When we launched it, and the program of the ethanol, I launched in 1979, because at that time it was the second shock of the oil, the petroleum. The price were on the skies. And we had a problem in Brazil because we are not producing enough oil at that time. So I took the responsibility to put the cars running only in ethanol. And down now is 94% of the fleet.
94% of the cars in Brazil run on ethanol.
Run in ethanol.
Is that the highest percent of any country in the world?
Oh, yes.
How viable is the idea of ethanol cars in a country that does not enjoy this incredible rich agricultural area that Brazil is? You can pretty much grow anything in Brazil, almost year-round. Very few countries have that benefit, and certainly here in China, as you know, it's a huge country, and the north is always sort of at the mercy of Mother Nature, a drought or a flood or the topsoil's been washed away. So how do you foresee something like this ever happening here in China?
But notwithstanding this, China is the third or the fourth largest producer of ethanol in the world. So the first is still the States, the second is Brazil. China comes very close on that. But the most important, Nancy, is that I do not envision the ethanol today as a substitute of oil, because what you would have to do, it's a huge amounts of sugarcane plantation.
But you have the benefit. And frankly, I'm quite surprised that China comes in fourth.
Yeah, they have a large
in
production.
supply, and that's really interesting to me. But you have, I want to speak to the actual petroleum as a combined car. You call that flex fuel.
Flex fuel.
Flex fuel. I did not know what that meant. Yeah. Flex fuel means the combination of the sustainable fuel like ethanol, and then
you just change a touch a button, and you could run in gasoline. You touch back, you could run on ethanol 100%.
But that's on a new car. You can't take old cars and put that kind of situation. It has to be a new car.
It has the new cars that we had in
Now,
the
here
US.
in China, one of the big things, now that China is looking away from being a totally export economy to a domestic consumer economy, one of the biggest things is the car industry for them, to build their own cars, produce their own cars, and service their own people with their cars. Will these cars, to your knowledge, have that ability to be a flex fuel, just like you're describing?
Sure.
That's what they are.
This is today is a proven technology, so this would be not a problem. What I think that the ethanol is now, we start with sugar cane, but if you take the bagasse, you could put 50% on top of that with the new technology that comes with the celluloid production from ethanol. So you have the sugar cane, you extract, you have this transformed in ethanol by a process mostly on distillation, but you could then take what is left, the leftover on that, and start a new process of celluloid transformation into ethanol and increasing at 50%.
So what you're saying now is the technology is advancing. So if you start with sugarcane, am I correct, and you produce X amount of ethanol, there is a residual that's left. And from that, you're coming up with new technology?
On the sugar plantation.
Oh, on the plantation.
On the plantation. So what normally is done today is that you have the sugar cane, you plant, and have only that. And the leftover there, is huge, because you do not use the whole, so if you take this and transform, only what we have in Brazil, we could go 50% on top of our actual production.
And start
today.
exporting it.
Yeah.
Here in China, are they using mostly sugarcane?
Yeah, they are using different, and also some kind of, today the technologies come, you could produce from wood, You could produce from from the garbage. You could produce, expanding on that. We are with an American company now, starting in Brazil to produce oil from the plastic bags and float plastic that are
You can
take those
plastic bags, deconstruct them, and produce.
Because the plastic is oil.
Of course, came from oil.
And so you take this down with the new technology. We are starting in Petrobras right now together with this company that we are partners.
That is a beautiful thought to me. Because I must tell you, I always feel very, very guilty about using plastic bags.
That's correct.
Because you say, are they really biodegradable? They're not. No. And I used to live in California, which was way ahead of all the other states. And they'd ask you if you wanted paper or plastic, and you'd feel terrible if you took plastic. I would never take plastic.
In Brazil, it's forbidden now.
Well, now it is. Is it easy to do business with your Chinese friends, your Chinese colleagues?
What I feel mostly is that they are very direct, very decisive, but they do not like the Brazilians to say no. We in Brazil do not like to say no, and the Chinese also
don't like to say no either, really.
Yeah, so you have to understand when the eyes tell you okay or tell no. It's the same with Brazilians, so we get along very well.
You get along very well.
Very well.
On the next Minds of Millionaires, meet Gerwen Yao, chairman of Shanghai Jiahua, the largest homegrown cosmetic company in China.
每个外资企业都犯过错误，因为他们太骄傲了，他们觉得来中国太容易了。其实不稀奇，像我这样的企业，曾经是中国最大的，我92年只能拿出几百万钱打广告，他拿10几个亿打广告。
Jiahua now has a large line of products, including Herbivist, Shanghai Beef, and Liu Shen. Traditionally, China uses corn and other grains to make costly ethanol to replace gasoline, while Brazil uses sugarcane that's cheaper to process and more efficient because they use the stalks and the waste. Consequently, Brazil is the world's largest exporter of biofuel and the second largest producer. China is a major customer and has lowered their tariffs on ethanol imports to maximize their move to more biofuel use. Again, Brazil is so fortunate because you have such a kind terroir, land, and Mother Nature seems to be very kind to you. And you have found enormous petroleum. It's a deep sea petroleum off your coast.
That's correct. 7,000 kilometers deep.
7,000 kilometers deep. So tell me what your relationship, Brazil's relationship, is to China now, just in terms of, forget food, because that's a whole nother issue, but just in terms of energy, because you're all part of BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa. So it's BRICS with the S. But just in terms of, you have a very nice trade agreement, obviously, with China. Where do you see this going, the petroleum business and China, and the ethanol business and China?
I think that for the oil is a very good question. The oil today, Brazil is exporting already 500,000 barrels per day into China. It's a $5 billion operation per year. The ethanol would be something that could come. Petrobras has, in fact, in Shanghai, a deposit here for storage. So I think that this will come down the road. But I think that the relation between Brazil and China today, as I told you, overpasses the trade between Brazil and the States. But if you take this, the figure is staggering. The HSBC made just a big ad telling that we are putting together offices in Brazil and in China dedicated to the trade, because we believe that the $50 billion today will be in 5 years going to $125 billion on the trade between Brazil and China.
Is it easy to do business with your Chinese friends, your Chinese colleagues?
What I feel mostly is that they are very direct, very decisive, but they do not like the Brazilians to say no. We in Brazil do not like to say no, and the Chinese also
They don't like to say no either, really.
Yeah, so you have to understand when the eyes tell you okay or tell no. It's the same with Brazilians, so we get along very well.
You get along very well.
Very well.
Well, I had to learn that, when I came here, because you find that the Chinese are very polite.
Yeah.
So if you say, do you like this, they'll say yes.
Yeah.
When they don't. They rarely say anything that's negative.
Yeah.
And so you wonder, what are they really thinking? But that's part of the culture.
Sure.
But now you're telling me that's the same
The
in Brazil.
Brazilians,
So
yes,
how do you ever get anything done? How do you ever know what each other are thinking? Or do
By
you...
the eyes.
Just the eyes. What do the eyes tell you?
Well, tell them if they are pleased or not, and vice versa, if we are pleased or not on that. I think that there is part of the culture here in China and Brazil that, notwithstanding, we have a very important group of Chinese in Brazil, but not predominant. Predominant in Brazil, Japanese, we have 1.5 million Japanese in Brazil.
I read that, yes.
Yes. We have Italians. I don't know how many Italians have Italian passport. 25 million, more than is 1/3 of Italy is in São Paulo and Brazil.
Why? Why?
Because
What's
the immigration
appeal?
went there, and you have Germans, you have Swedish people there. So Brazil is a melting pot like the States, and China is not yet a melting pot, but we reproduced almost what you did in the States. Polish people, so, and each individually with their own culture. But what is quite important, for instance, the Japanese, that normally they are secluded and they constitute a group in every country. In Brazil, they married with Brazilians, so they are completely integrated.
So what is it about Brazil that you have immigrants intermarrying, what you've just described as the Japanese don't stay off to themselves and marry within their own culture, their own ethnic groups that they enter. What is it about Brazil?
I think that Brazil, there is a sense, you have Jews and Arab on the same street, one at left, the other at right. And they go to the same restaurant, they are good friends. And so I think that the culture in Brazil came to be absorbing the ethnics and transforming them into Brazilians. So you do not see any kind of hostility between a Jew and between an Arab or the Japanese that are secluded or the Polish that are, they are the Germans and so on. They are all integrated.
So Chinese have no problems moving there and assimilating within the whole society.
Oh, sure.
Same.
Now Koreans are coming, repeating what the Japanese made. And the Chinese also are being integrated and considered on the first generation. Brazilians are 100%.
I really enjoy talking to you because, to be honest with you, I did not know the future was so positive for China in terms of their energy for cars and the car industry. I just assumed, I don't drive here in China like I did in the States, so I don't know how much the fuel is costing. But, I'm just assuming that, well, I see TV, of course, so I understand. So I was just assuming that they're going to face the very bleak future that so much of the rest of the world does, that is dependent on petroleum, like the US, like Europe, and you see these soaring prices, and then you're really at the mercy of the Middle Eastern countries. This is just a dreadful situation. So you don't find China is in a precarious situation like perhaps Europe, which has no source of petroleum on their own, or the U.S. The U.S. has some, but are they in a better position, I guess, is what
I think that what you're telling makes a lot of sense in the wars, but I do not think that is a bleak future for China. I do not believe China is a bubble.
I was just going to ask you that. You anticipated it.
But in this discussion came exactly like, what kind of role has China to be in the future on the monetary system, on the economic system? And I think that is the same what we expect from Brazil. We are not anymore emerging economies. We are powerhouses. A country that has the second largest economy in the world could not be emerging.
I know, or even developing. You heard that term about
sure.
China is a developing country. No, it's developed.
Absolutely. I think that there is no bubble. I just took a train. I was supposed to come from Beijing into Shanghai by plane. But then I decided the last moment I had a dinner in Beijing, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, why don't you take the train? It's a long time." So I took the train, mostly to see the difference in size. So you see that there is not about, you see the towns growing up like mushrooms. You see the new technology, the train stations, and so you cannot tell China is underdeveloped. It's developed with different areas. Could you imagine the second largest economy of the world that finances part of the so-called developed countries called developing?
But why is that adjective then so often used about China being a developing country or developing economy when it really isn't?
But this is, you recall about a long time ago, I think that was a French intellectual who was sipping his Pernod in Paris and taking some petit vin and then invented third worlds. And this became something that was, everybody talked during 2 generations about the third world. China, Brazil, all these countries that now are powerhouses.
So is there such thing now as a third world?
I think that today you cannot compare what it was about 25 years ago. If you take Africa, let's imagine, Africa is growing on a compound rate of 5% a year. And are countries that are becoming very, very important on energy, very important minerals, very important. So in education also, they have problems, but they will be overcome. And I am very much positive towards Africa. So you see Russia, China today having the operations here with Vietnam, Thailand, organizing this, even Japan. So I think that these blocks will be consolidated down the road, but we have to rephrase this. There are no more developing countries.
Are there no more third world countries then?
For sure not. And our emerging economies. I told the Xinhua, look, we are powerhouses, each one with its capacity, but we are not for sure emerging anymore. My father, my mother thought that I was needing some kind of test to see what I should have done in my life, on my life. So they sent me with a doctor that made all the kind of tests and so on. And so
you mean a psychologist?
Yeah, you should have been, you must be an engineer.
So then we can tell all the parents out there that watch this show and wondering about their kids, whether they should take their kids off to a psychologist who does tests about telling them what they should study. Forget it.
Forget about
Save
it.
the money.
Yeah,
Save the money.
On the next Minds of Millionaires, meet Gerwen Yao, chairman of Shanghai Jiahua, the largest homegrown cosmetic company in China.
每个外资企业都犯过错误，因为他们太骄傲了，他们觉得来中国太容易了。其实不稀奇，像我这样的企业，曾经是中国最大的， 我92年只能拿出几百万钱打广告，他拿10几个亿打广告。
Jawa now has a large line of products, including Herbivist, Shanghai Beef, and Liu Shen. This is Mario Garnero, the world-famous Brazilian entrepreneur, considered the visionary who developed the computer, mobile phone, and biofuel industries in his country. He's the founder and chairman of Brazil Invest, Brazil's premier merchant bank responsible for attracting investments of over 12 billion US dollars. As a young man, Mario Garnero was trained as a lawyer, but he never practiced law. Instead, he followed a career path in Brazil in many industries.
You know, you're a very modest man, but in fact, you were called the father of ethanol because I believe it was 1980 or 1981 in Brazil, there was a petroleum shortage, and you convinced the government to switch over to ethanol, which was really unheard of at that time. And then you were also ahead of the curve because you brought in mobile phone and computer technology. But you're trained as a lawyer. What goes on in your mind when you come up with these innovative thoughts and you're ahead of the curve, but in fact you studied law?
But this is
Nothing wrong with being a lawyer. I'm just
no. But this is very, very curious. It's a good question. My father, my mother thought that I was needing some kind of test to see what I should have done in my life, on my life. So they sent me with a doctor that made all the kind of tests and so on. And so look,
You mean a psychologist?
Yeah. You should have been, you must be an engineer. So, an engineer, yes. So I went to school, prepare myself for the university to be an engineer. But then down the road, I thought, okay, I would like to have a more flexible and more humanistic direction on life. And then I turned and to be a lawyer, but I never went to a court, and then was involved in business.
You never practiced law,
Never.
and you never practiced engineering per se.
I had the best lawyers working for me and the best engineers, but I never tried to compete with them.
So then we can tell all the parents out there that watch this show and wondering about their kids, whether they should take their kids off to a psychologist who does tests about telling them what they should study. Forget it.
Forget about
Save
it.
the money.
Yeah,
Save the money.
And I think that one thing that life has taught me, Nancy, is that to be successful, there's a lucky, perhaps 10%. There's 90% of effort and sweat. But the most important is that you be delighted what you do.
You should be delighted with what you do.
Fortunately, I am. So I see some people waking up every day and telling you, oh, it's a terrible day, it will be complicated. So I do get up very early in the morning, think, oh, what a beautiful day.
Have you always felt that way?
Yes, what a beautiful day. What kind of problems I have to solve during the day. So because you are happy what you do. If you're not happy with what you are doing, better is to leave and start again.
Just leave and start something else.
Start again.
But you know, I wonder, I have two questions for you about this. You say you think life is about 90% of working hard, sweating, preparing yourself, and 10% is luck, and that you wake up every morning and you can't wait to do things. You're excited. But then there is a percentage of everybody whose personality is somehow divided between their parents to some extent. You inherit a basic personality trait, don't you think so?
Oh, for sure, sure.
And do you think you inherited this optimistic attitude from one or both of your parents?
Yes, my father was born in Italy. He was an engineer and went to Brazil and starts his life over there when he was 27 years old. Had participated in the war, had been, was 17 years old, he was on the first war. And from him, I worked something that was the constant devotion to work. From my mother, what I got mostly was a sense of mission. You have to accomplish what you start, and you have to be prepared to be perhaps using what the Chinese have as a say. If you fall 3 times, get up 4. And this is what perhaps I learned on that. Genetically, I could not explain. Perhaps the DNA has given a little of those points that my parents had.
Well, you certainly have been blessed with good genes. Once this is done, I wonder if I can quote something that you said at an MIT Brazil Invest conference. You were talking about tech-intensive societies, of which you have been very active in. And again, I have to say, ahead of the curve. And you said, this is not only about hard science and math and technology, but especially about management. In today's world, management comes before capital. What did you mean when you said that? I mean, I understand literally, but what did you mean?
When you have a good management, he raised money in the States. He has a good idea and could prove that, he raised money. When is a failure on the business, mostly is because the man that was ahead of that was not able enough to prevent a failure.
I'm thinking in terms of management, and I'd like you to speak to this here in China on 2 levels. In China, just like it seems in the rest of the world, the most popular graduate degree is almost profoundly much higher for an MBA, as you know. And that's the same in the US, it's the same in Europe, it's the same everywhere. I have a great worry that there's going to be a plethora of college kids that graduate with MBAs and no jobs for them because there'll be too many of them. But having said that, there's also a big issue about middle management in China. And I've read a lot about that, how particularly domestic companies, let's just talk about multinationals, were putting their own people in and couldn't find enough middle management here in China because MBAs are rather a new concept. And now they're making a real push because multinationals would be much happier having their middle management Chinese.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that's just way ahead. So what do you think about all that? I mean, do you think there'll be too many MBAs in the future?
I think that will be too many MBAs diverted into managers and not being
banking and finance.
But
that's a good thing, though, isn't it?
No, but a very, very interesting point that you are telling. Chinese are today making about 300,000 engineers per year forming here. The States is far behind. But the Chinese are sending only to the States 120,000 people per year, students to be there. And of course, the productivity of the industry in the future will depend exactly on the middle management. So you would be progressively having the market to offer better salaries for engineers, better for middle management. And then it will be attracting the guys that are thinking that the MBA, and everybody would like to go at MBA because, oh, I made an IPO. Oh, I got fantastic. But when they go to Wall Street, for instance, today, and you see the quantity of people that was dismissed, lost
during the financial crisis in the 2008.
For sure. And you are right, they are not so productive because we're not trained to be there.
So as a cautionary tale, and if you were to come to the US, particularly in 2008, you would find a whole lot of unemployed MBAs and underemployed, taking virtually any job. So given that our show is watched by a lot of college kids, a lot of graduate students, and their parents, and high school kids, and they're really making decisions about their life, what would you say to them given your background? I mean, you have a great sense because you deal with global economies. What would you say to them if they weren't going to do an MBA what would be something that you see as even a more viable career to have here in China?
I would say that it's very easy for them to have the temptation to have the MBA. MBA, he will be not rich. The question of making IPOs does privilege someone that has a very, very great knowledge and has had also the opportunities that are being today more and more difficult. So I think that for these young kids, what I would suggest is just to see the curves of growth of the industry, of the commerce, trade. It's something that will become very important.
And you don't need an MBA to be at the top of the game on trade.
No, for sure not.
In fact, a lot of international studies would be logical.
For sure. I think that the most important is to see what you would be doing in the future. And perhaps we could come back to it. He has to think after getting the studies and get the first job, if he's happy with that. Otherwise, he would be leaving this and searching another opportunity, and would be at this time a little bit late.
Wouldn't you advise all college kids when they graduate not to go to graduate school right away? In fact, in the U.S. and all the management business schools here, they want those college graduates to go off and work. It used to be you'd apply and go right from undergraduate to a business school.
Yeah.
Now they're saying they don't even really want to look at an application like that. They want you to go to work for 3 to 5 years, Mario.
Yeah, and then
that seems like such a long time.
Long time, yeah. And 3 or 5 years when they are forming their views of the world. And then to come back is much more complicated than from the start from anew. So I think that is a good point. I think that there is a time of thinking and to decide, not making the psychological test that I made I just demoralized the test, but having a sort of decision based upon the reality in which they will be within 10, 20 years exercising what they learned about.
Good advice. Of all the people you've met, and you've had an extraordinary experience in life, and I go through the list of people, and it's really too long here, but you know, you have Henry Kissinger, Kofi Annan, of course Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was my neighbor when I lived
in California.
George Bush, and you have, well, it goes on and on, Prince Albert, Prince Rainier, the presidents of most countries, you know, it goes on and on and on, President Reagan, Clinton.
For sure, President Clinton is one of the most important, but I tell you that President Reagan also very impressive.
I had interviewed his wife, Nancy Reagan.
Do you talk about it with the president? Or you try to not talk about it, put it out of your mind?
No, we don't talk about it.
Why not?
Because I would probably do what I'm doing right now.
10年钱香阁精心演绎海派辣菜，前菜用辣，出神入化。钱香阁采集贵州天地灵气，天然原材空运上海，独家12门辣艺，精试22种辣味，香、辣、酸、鲜，旷世美味。原生态时尚美食，钱香阁。
I have a couple of things I want to ask you about your board of advisors. It's a very impressive board, and I love it because they come from...
You have friends from...
all over the world, and I recognize a couple of these Americans that I know. But I'd like to talk about the two Chinese members of your board. One is Silas Chow, and his company is Novel.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I met him here. I think it was Andy Yan introduced me to Silas. And then the other one is Sir David Tang of the famous Shanghai Tang.
Shanghai Tang.
How is it you chose them to be on your board? What did you see in each of them?
Silas is a good friend of mine. He's a very impressive guy. Very.
What impressed you most about him?
His sense of opportunity and his decision and how he moves fast. You know that he is the second largest utilizer of private jets in the world.
I did not know that.
It says that he is the second largest
He uses private jets more than...
Oh, but he used more than his house, for sure. He bought this course. He started and became a very important. Has a textile industry, very important.
I read, I think it was Yan told me that I think it's 4 out of every 5 sweaters made for export from Hong Kong and China are made by his company.
Yes, true. And Dave Tang, you know, it's perhaps the most connected man in the world. And it's loved by the Prince Charles, is loved by everybody.
Why does everyone love him? What is it about his personality?
Because everybody that gets in touch with him, he could help him in anything. And help is not financial. You could help serving him a Coca-Cola. You could be helpful to someone just giving a sort of advice. And we have another one that you know very well, and that's my boss in China, Yu Khan.
She's now joining your board.
Your board.
Yeah,
so
that's,
I think
you got the heavy hitters.
Yes.
She was just in Forbes magazine as one of the 50 most powerful women in all of Asia.
Yes, yes, I saw that, but I have invited her before that.
You did?
Yeah.
You had to be impressed when she took over Miss Universe China and went to the finals in your country.
Oh, sure.
And look what happened. Look
And
what
it
happened
wasn't
to Miss
just that Zelina was not the Miss Universe, because she was by far the most beautiful of them. But this is what she made a fantastic job.
But she came in as the fourth
yeah, so very, the first time. And so...
But you saw, trained her in English, in current affairs, as well as all the other things that you would expect someone to be trained in. But I think she went the extra mile with her, don't you?
Oh, yes, for sure.
China.
Kind of a shy person. I used to have no confidence with my height. In China, we don't really have a lot of tall girls. But now I'm fine with my height, even though I'm the tallest one here. I found out my confidence, so I'm okay now.
24 years old, from China!
Congratulations, you're now the national director of Miss Universe China pageant. How did that all come about?
You know, China being so big, Miss Universe says, you know, we are really, really keen on seeing a gorgeous, a fantastic Chinese girl who could represent your country, you say. If you don't do it, nobody is going to do it.
Of all the people you've met, and you've had an extraordinary experience in life, and I go through the list of people, and it's really too long here, but you know, you have Henry Kissinger, Kofi Annan, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was my neighbor when I lived
in California.
George Bush.
Yes.
And you have, well, it goes on and on, Prince Albert, Prince Rainier, the presidents of most countries, you know, it goes on and on and on, President Reagan, Clinton. Of all the presidents in America, just because I'm an American, I'm curious, I've been told that Bill Clinton, all presidents have a certain charisma, or they wouldn't have gotten there, or they wouldn't have appealed to the public, and they would never have won the election. I mean, having said that, they're all charismatic. Yes. But I have been told by people who have known all the various presidents that Bill Clinton just has this like hot fire of charisma that surrounds him. Would you agree?
For sure. And the last time we had he came with us, we made last year in September, we made this foreign there. You see how, and he made a speech there and told something about Brazil. He stayed 20 minutes we stayed on the sidewalk. The traffic was so where he comes, traffic stops on that. 20 minutes talking, two of us on the sidewalk, and the security is all proud of.
He loves people.
He loves people.
He loves people.
So for sure, President Clinton is one of the most important. But I tell you that President Reagan also, I invited him and he came to Brazil under my invitation, came to São Paulo, my town. It was also very impressive.
I had interviewed his wife, Nancy Reagan, and of course we had the same name. I have the name like she does. So he said, "I like your name." And then he said to me, "Thank you for being so kind to my wife."
Yeah.
And I thought, what a lovely, genuine.
Do you talk about it with the president? Or you try to not talk about it, put it out of your mind?
No, we don't talk about it.
Why not?
Because I would probably do what I'm doing right now.
You have really enjoyed such a business success, but such a personal success as well. People have called you a statesman. One wonders why you haven't gone into politics or something. You don't have to, because you're the unofficial statesman. And you've made so many important meetings happen. I mean, between major world leaders, you've been responsible for those. What drives you now in your life? You've accomplished so much. You just don't seem to slow down. Are you fueled by ethanol? I mean, I don't know, but you just seem to have this extraordinary energy.
No, I think that the most important is that to you to feel that you are constructing something. It's not for money, it's not for prestige, it's not for anything more than to bring some of your experience and work to get a world a little bit better. And then I think that what drives me is the idea that life does not prevent you for creating. On the contrary, you're creating, as long as you create and be active, you extend your life.
This has been such a pleasure. I've read so much about you,
Thank
and
you
you
very
are a
much.
delightful man. Thank you so very, very much.